Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be talking today about a new emphasis in the churches to help marriages, one of the most joyful but one of the most difficult human relationships. Stay with us for today's episode of Austin Faith Dialogue.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you joined us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and we'll be talking about the Marriage Savers Initiative with two guests today. First, we have Barry Metz from the Center for Marriage and Family Intimacy and Bishop John McCarthy of the Diocese of Austin. Glad to have both of you.
Thank you to be here.
Let's not assume as we start that people necessarily have even heard about Marriage Savers. So perhaps one of you can talk about the history of this movement?
Sure.
I think that's a safe bet. That it's such a new concept, and the amount of publicity given it at the time that the program went public was not overwhelming. And so Barry and I are happy to have the opportunity to visit with you, Sandy, and talk about it. This is an extraordinary program that occurred back in February when 300 to 350 Austin area clergy persons met over lunch to hear several speakers talk about something that we all share in common, namely a commitment to family life. And this particular gathering was concentrating on Christian family life. The principal speaker was a man that I met in Washington, D.C. about 2 years ago, a layman, a newspaper man who writes a syndicated column on ethics. His name was Michael McManus. And McManus collared me and wanted to know what the Austin area was doing to, as the churches of the Austin area were doing to stabilize Christian family living. And I told him that, you know, we all try to do something, and McManus wasn't satisfied with that. And he put me in touch with a co-worker of Barry's, Dr. David Ferguson, who's the director of the Center for Marriage and Family Intimacy. And it was an interesting combination. We both share this interest in marriage and Christian family living, and yet David is from the Bible church tradition. I'm a Roman Catholic priest, and yet in this area we had a tremendous amount in common. So together we began convening small groups of area pastors, and then gradually the organization was stabilized and made a little more concrete, and culminating in that gathering where we asked the pastors of the area to take seriously their responsibilities to assist young couples who are preparing for marriage, to assist young marriages, and to assist people who find themselves in crisis situation vis-a-vis their marriage. And out of it has come the program that we'd like to talk to you about today. We're off to a great success. There's an enormous amount of work to be done, but we're prepared to do it.
I assume, though, that this whole initiative hasn't sprung just full-blown here in Austin. What else has been happening, say, around the country?
Sure. This effort started by McManus in 1983. He started sensing that the church needed to do more to solve the marriage problem. He kind of says that churches had become blessing factories, marriage machines, and so he started speaking to groups of clergy, and about 1986 he spoke to a group in Modesto, and about 100 pastors, clergy, priests agreed to sign the first community marriage statement there. Since that time, since 1986, there have been 36. The Austin statement, the Austin Community Marriage Statement, is the 36th one to date.
So what is this statement? I mean, is an actual written document that someone signs?
Well, let me say what traditionally many of us have not been doing. There's been a tradition. The Roman Catholic Church began to work against it maybe 15 years ago, but there's been a tradition where the role of the clergyman was to bless or witness the marriage ceremony, in which a man and a woman give themselves to each other in marriage. And when you're talking about Christian marriage and baptized Christians, that takes on for all of our churches we have different theological aspects of it, but it takes on a very important theological relationship, not just a civil contract. in many instances over the years, we've just been there at the wedding ceremony. We wished them well, prayed for them, waved to them as they drove off on a honeymoon, and that was the end of it. And yet marriage is, in every society, and it's even for us, it's even more important as far as Christians are concerned, marriage is the building block of our culture and our civilization. It's in marriage where not only is life transmitted, but it's in marriage that children are formed and educated. The value system of the other generation is transferred. It's an educational system. It's an economic and social system, a cultural system. And when you have a society that doesn't protect the marriages of the culture in the country, you have a society that's sick. And if marriage collapses, the society will collapse. And Barry probably knows the statistics better than I do, but they're pretty grim on the state of stable marriages in this country. Well, roughly like, I think probably last night, 4 to 5 kids out of 10, any 10 kids, did not spend the night under the same roof with their father. Their natural father. When you think about that, you have a monumental problem present in your society.
How bad are the statistics then?
50% of all new marriages end in divorce, and if you add those that are permanently separated, then 60% of all new marriages then dissolve in some way. I think divorce has tripled since 1970 in number. The no-fault divorce laws have been kind of encouraged or allowed divorce to happen in an easier fashion. That's part of the problem.
Marriage is a risky enterprise, I know.
Sure.
So then what we have are clergy, I assume, from various churches in the Austin area recommitting themselves to helping strengthen marriages, right?
And to prepare. In other words, it's such an important event in a person's life. But traditionally, we haven't asked for very much. We put in a lot of time on who's going to cater the reception, you know, what kind of flowers to have. But for the two people to get to really know each other, that's what we're doing, developing programs, many already developed, so that a young man and a young woman really get to know each other more than she's so good looking, or he's a wonderful dancer, or he's handsome, to understand each other psychologically, to know their value systems, to find out where their respective value systems may be in conflict with each other. To find that these programs that we run, that the Catholic Church has been doing it for a number of years, it sounds very unromantic, but we don't consider them successful. A weekend preparation for marriage unless one or two couples decide that they ought not to go any further together. And although that's a wrenching experience for a couple who feel that they're very much in love, it's a lot less wrenching than 2 years later than a baby who's going to grow up without being with both parents.
So one of the components then is taking the time to work with people before the marriage. What does that look like? What happens?
There would be some premarital counseling. There might be some premarital inventories. For example, I think the Catholic Church urges couples to have 6 months of premarital work. The average Protestant clergyman basically says, if we counsel them 3 or 4 times, then that's fine. And so we were really challenging Protestant clergies to rise to the level of our Catholic brethren to increase that. So there's a whole. In fact, our community marriage statement really covers the whole continuum of marriage. In other words, instead of focusing even on just preparation, working with youth in the area of abstinence, working with engaged couples, with engaged encounters, things like that, premarital inventories, and then with marriages and enriching them, making good marriages better, and then marriages that are currently troubled, helping them, and then even divorce recovery. So there's the whole continuum that the statement tries to raise awareness in the lives of pastors. And so the pastors basically sign that and saying, I'm committed to help marriage along that whole continuum. So.
Okay. Now, what kind of additional, say, training or preparation might that require for the clergy?
Well, most clergy today are fairly well trained in that area. And one thing they just have to know is the tremendous resources that are available to assist in these programs. For example, Barry's organization, the Center for Marriage and Family Intimacy, has a wide range of tools that a young pastor, or an older pastor for that matter, could utilize in assisting. In the Roman Catholic dioceses across the country, we've been at this, as I said, for many years, and we have programs that are highly developed. But the church, I would love to see our efforts succeed all across the country, but we're not kidding ourselves about the fact that we don't control, and we shouldn't, the totality of life in America. There are other factors that are eroding marriage. The entertainment industry is not a big help. One of the problems we have in this country is transferring our value system. Most Americans are firmly committed to belief in God. The Christians firmly committed to Jesus Christ as Savior. Committed to a good life, committed to living by the commandments. But when you look at the value system that's transferred by the entertainment industry in this country, what was the effect of Johnny Carson cracking jokes about his divorces every night for 20 years? Or his associate laughing and talking about his. For somebody to watch that, for a young person, their formative years, to watch that, it's devastating as far as strong values of marriage are concerned. So we would like to see not only that we do a better job in terms of our churches, but that the society itself be committed to a stable marriage. We've got to have the freedom for people to divorce. We've got to have the freedom to correct mistakes. But that ought to be seen as an evil to be avoided rather than something to be just tolerated. And here our stress, and Barry pointed this out before the program, we're really stressing the importance of a good marriage, not the sadness of divorce.
And at this point, the statement focuses on people in Christian marriage. What do you see happening for folks who are in Jewish or interfaith or any other denomination marriages?
Well, I'm sure that the 210 churches that committed to the community marriage statement in Austin would do everything they could to help churches or people that are outside the faith. And so we would be open to helping in any way.
Sure. The bottom line is strengthening marriages. We just happen to start with people in Christian marriage.
Well, it's basically a Western problem, and in the Western world, the Christians are overwhelmingly, the vast majority of the population we're talking about is overwhelmingly Christian. Barry, you had an interesting statistic before the program about Japan.
Sure. Last week, 40 to 50% of Americans attended a religious service. In Japan, I think 2% of the population attended a religious service. And yet, the divorce rate in America is 5 times that of Japan. And that doesn't say churches are causing divorce, but it says the churches need to be doing something. There should be a difference since I think clergy bless or do 75% of all marriages. There should be a difference. Churches should be part of the solution. I think that's the focus of this, is getting churches to be part of the solution. So.
Sounds like there's a great opportunity since churches do see a number of people.
Right.
Now, the statement was signed in February, as I recall, right?
January 31st. Right.
And what's happened since then?
We're following up that effort. It's now been 3 months, and several churches have begun marriage-saving initiatives. One church has held a community marriage class. There was some prepare training. In other words, that was training counselors and pastors on doing premarital inventories, and we have another one of those scheduled. And so we're actually sending out a letter this week to try to obtain some feedback and see what is the status. Pastor, what have you done differently given that you committed to this 3? So we're trying to hold the clergy accountable to their commitment.
Exactly. That's the way to go.
Don't you think it'll take a year or two to measure anything?
No, that's right. That's right.
Well, accountability is a good place to start, and we'll have some more conversation here in a minute as we come back for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue, but stay with us.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
We're in a lively discussion today about the Marriage Savers Initiative here on Austin Faith Dialogue. And our guests are Barry Metz from the Center for Marriage and Family Intimacy and Bishop John McCarthy. It's certainly good to have you guys. We stopped right where we were getting into it, some good discussion about the whole notion of accountability and the pastors who signed the marriage statement, checking to see what they've done. What else might you want to say about that, Bishop?
Well, first of all, it's a major change in how we respond to this issue. And people are creatures of habit, so I have no illusion that it's going to take a sizable amount of time and gentle encouragement and to bring about the kind of response we really want. But you will not be able to measure it for several years. There are two realities. If we're successful, and men and women enter marriage more generously and with greater maturity, they will be happier. We'll not be able to come back and give you a mathematical evaluation of that. Happier people, more committed to each other, more loving. We believe with all our hearts it'll occur. What we can come back with in 2 or 3 years is a measure of the divorce rate in Travis County. In other cities where this has been done and they've looked at it for 2 or 3 years, there have been dramatic drops in the divorce rate. Now, divorce is not going to disappear. We're human beings and we make mistakes. But that terrible percentage that Barry quoted of half of our marriages, every time you see divorce granted in a newspaper, remember that that man once looked into the eyes of that woman and said, "I love you. Can we share life together?" And every divorce in that sense is a tragedy. If we can eliminate 10%, 20%, 30% of that, we'll be adding to the happiness level in our community. But we won't, but the people involved will, to a tremendous extent.
One of the interesting things that this effort also brings, because if a pastor was watching right now, they'd say, boy, they're adding to my workload. And there's a sense in which this whole effort focuses on mentor couples. In other words, if a pastor could find 10 couples in his church that could help with this effort. McManus's church in Maryland actually has, one day the pastor stood up and said, are there some of the older couples that would enjoy helping in marriage? And those couples, I think 10 couples came down and they were trained to administer this prepare inventory, and they do a lot. They share the load, and so there's a sense in which the pastor signed the dotted line on this commitment, but we really want him to see that we're trying to help him by encouraging him to get lay couples involved.
So it's really an effort of the entire church community,
Right.
not simply the pastor. I'd be interested to know who signed on to this. Obviously, some Catholic folks were there, but who else was there?
Sure. There were 20 different over 20 different denominations, 210 churches, all the mainline denominations, a lot of the independents, so it was a really good effort. Of the 36 community marriage policies done to date, we had the most involvement in terms of churches, and so we're real excited about that.
Oh, I can see why. Is there an ongoing steering committee or organizing group or anything like that?
We're just following up with some accountability. I think our organization is trying to keep that work of networking and accountability going. So.
Okay.
But the steering committee that brought it all together does intend to continue to function and provide that monitoring.
Sure.
And how do you see your new passion for this ministry influencing, say, your conversations with your other colleagues, your colleague bishops?
Well, I wouldn't call it a new passion. I was working in this in the Roman Catholic Church 35 years ago. We used to have a much simpler program called the Pre-Cana Conference. It draws its name from the New Testament scene in which our Lord performs his first sign of divine power, the marriage feast at Cana. And we take that Cana as sort of a sacramental symbol for us of marriage, Christian marriage. We've been doing this for at least 30 or 35 years in some form. The last 15 years or so, much more scientific. That doesn't sound very good, but it is. The inventory, personal inventory, for example, is a tremendous tool with which we can give every couple preparing for marriage at no cost a real insight into themselves and into their spouse, which gives them the opportunity to go into in-depth conversations that may never come up if they're just talking about the movie or the party, but we help them to talk about themselves. And I couldn't agree more with Barry that our program has gone far beyond. The role of the pastor is to have the vision that it's important and to provide the motivation for others to get involved. It's not the role of the pastor to do all this monumental work of preparing dozens and ultimately hundreds and thousands of young couples for what is the essential vocation that they have in life. Think how much time we put into preparation for jobs and training of this sort. And yet we allow people to enter into marriage with not much more than a good party and a pat on the back, and we wish them well. The churches have to add their voice to the need to change that.
Now, I believe there already are some church-related or at least religiously based efforts at strengthening marriages, marriage encounter, marriage enrichment and such. How is the Marriage Savers movement or initiative, how's it different?
Well, the Marriage Savers Initiative is really a term coined by McManus, but it includes all of those. In other words, he encourages in his book, Marriage Savers, Marriage Encounter is one of those, and Engaged Encounter is part of that also. So it's, that's his term, but it's the whole spectrum.
You have 4 periods, really. You have marriage preparation. You can divide that into remote and immediate. And you have the marriage event itself and the preparation that we're really stressed. That's what we're really stressing here. But Barry's right. It's the whole continuum. And then you have the situation after marriage where couples begin to flounder. And there doesn't seem to be anyone who cares. There doesn't seem to be anyone who helps. The group that ought to care the most is their church. And then finally, ultimately, you're going to have some divorces. And you also have people losing their spouse by death. And so there needs to be a place in the life of the church to help people after a divorce or after a death. So it's this relationship which is so sacred and so important to human life, and the church is so important to human life and is the ultimate transfer of values for most of us. The church needs to be involved in each one of these steps, and that's what we're working towards.
Sounds like a broadening then and a deepening of some current efforts. Well, suppose someone hearing us talk today gets real excited about the possibilities of strengthening their marriage or marriage to be. What do they do? Who do they march up to and say, sign me up, I'd like to participate? Where do they go? The
natural person, and for us, would be their local pastor. Every one of our men is aware of this program and prepared to assist in any way possible.
Okay.
It may vary with other faith groups.
Right, so if someone is Roman Catholic, the local priest is likely to be involved. What about the rest of us?
The local parish may not be the priest. We have, many of our parishes have directors of family life and directors of religious education. But if they'll contact the parish, there'll be someone in the parish who can assist them. It may be the priest, but it may not necessarily be.
Okay.
Sure.
And for folks who don't happen to be Roman Catholic?
We would encourage, again, the focus on a local church that would be involved in the effort. And I mean, I suppose they could call our organization, but we're coming alongside the church, and so I really think that's the good focus, is to get them back to the local church.
And obviously there are many more than, 350 pastors in the Austin area. What will happen then with people who didn't happen to be contacted or get involved this first time around? How will they be brought on board?
Well, we're going to continue to get churches involved as we move along and continue to promote this. In fact, our mail out went to basically 900 pastors in the Austin area. Austin area plus some north and some south. And so we really are trying to encourage more involvement in this effort as we go.
I once heard the role of a pastor as being described as the life of a person under a funnel. And everybody with a good idea or a new idea pours it in at the top and it drops down on him, whether it be alcoholism, child abuse, premarital sex, you name economic downturn, whatever it is, and the pastor can't do it. And we're not trying to add to that. We're trying to create an atmosphere where the churches, the people across the board in the churches will be involved, and not just the pastor. But without his vision or her vision, and without the encouragement of that religious leader, it won't go anywhere. But we believe also that many of these pastors, when this announcement first came out, said it's just another program, you know. We believe that if these few hundred that are getting started are successful, that'll have a push-pull effect on those who are holding back a little bit.
So let's project, say, 3 years, 5 years on down the road here in the greater Austin area. What do you suppose this movement, this initiative is going to look like?
Well, I would say that with this movement, you don't see something. It's, you know, What we're trying to do is affect a lot of extraordinarily important, intimate, personal relationships. You don't see that. What you would see is what you would be conscious of is a stronger sense of family identity, tighter families, marriages not torn by divorce, and you'll go to the county courthouse and get statistics that shows that for some reason back in 1996 and 97 the divorce rate began to go down. It went down 7% one year, and then a year and a half later it went down 10%. And if the men and women who are committed to this are supported by the larger society, we'll see it drop and drop and drop. There'll always be divorce in our culture, in our society, but 50% is something that we ought, as a people, ought to find it repugnant, and that we don't want to tolerate that.
Sure.
We're not judging any couple. Every couple is, but we're saying that society has got to do a better job of transferring values to the next generation than we're doing right now, and the church has a responsibility to be a major player in that.
And also, I assume centers like the center where you work, right, Barry?
Right, we facilitate a lot of different denominations and a lot of different churches, and so we can be helpful in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good. I hope that folks will call on you all.
Sure.
And is there, say, one particular person to get in touch with if a pastor is interested in responding?
I suppose we could have them call our office, and I would be glad to field the calls.
Okay, so folks could call the
METZ,
center.
M-E-T-Z.
Okay, so folks could call the Center for Marriage
Sure.
and Family Intimacy.
795-0498 in the Austin area.
Good. And I hope they will. And I hope we have opportunity for some additional conversation then as time goes on, just to see how well this initiative has really made a quiet but dramatic difference in the Austin area.
Sure.
Let's hope.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
part of the irony is that this Catholic bishop who's never been married is the passion behind this effort. And I think that's the irony of God that's beautiful in this. And we really are excited about the ecumenical part of this effort.
But I'm surrounded by about 60,000 families.
That's right.
There's 300,000 people, 350,000 people roughly,
Sure.
in the Catholic family here.
Well, we know God has a sense of humor, and certainly God is smiling at this.
Amen.
Thank you both for being here today to talk about this good work in progress.
Sure.
And thank you all for joining us as we've talked about the Marriage Savers Initiative, a new, exciting way we hope to broaden and deepen the marriage relationship for all of us. Thank you for joining us on Austin Faith Dialogue, and we'll see you next week.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.